Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we're going to look at one of my no ID mini Phalaenopsis. And the reason I say no ID is this orchid did not come with a tag, but allegedly it could be Phalaenopsis pink girl. And if it were, it would be a cross between Schilleriana and Zuma Pixie. Based on a lot of the characteristics, I think this one does look like pink girl, but I can't say for sure. However, the markings on the leaves, as well as the time of the year that it would bloom, plus some of the characteristics on the flowers really makes me feel that it could be a pink girl. But again, without a tag, I can know for sure. Toward the end of 2019, it started to put out 2 spikes, which was really exciting because for this orchid, I have never been able to make it grow 2 spikes. And even when I first bought it, it only came with 1 spike. So I didn't know that it was capable of doing double spikes at one go. So this is definitely a dramatic improvement from all the years that I have had this orchid. So even at winter time, it was in active growth. You can see that it was being really busy producing leaves, producing roots, and then also trying to put out 2 spikes while maturing its buds. So it was doing a lot of things, and that's also a characteristic of Schilleriana, because Schilleriana is a winter blooming orchid. So in winter time is when that species and this one potentially to really be doing a lot of things. And speaking of Schilleriana, just on a side note here, Schilleriana, because it's winter blooming, so it always is a early bloomer compared to all my other orchids. But this year, if you watch my other videos, you would know that it blooms slightly later, and then I was able to have an overlap so that Schilleriana, Sturtiana, and their cross called Philadelphia were all in the same picture, and that's also a first for me and for this channel. So back to this orchid. This orchid is kind of cute. And I really love the whole tiny spots on the petals and sepals. The only downside is I don't detect a big, strong fragrance. Many of my friends and even some of the posts that I see online talking about this pink girl having a really sweet fragrance, well, I have to put my nose really close to it to even smell a little tiny bit. So I wouldn't consider this orchid fragrant. So maybe that's just one of the defects of this particular orchid. Maybe that's how it ended up in a grocery store. Who knows? But if you look closer though, a lot of the flowers are missing either a petal or 2 petals. Either a petal on the top left, top right, or just missing 2 petals altogether. And this is something that this orchid did not do last year. So I don't know, maybe because it's putting out 2 spikes, and the fact that I only gave it quarter strength fertilizer like all my other orchids, maybe it's malnutritioned. Who knows? But last year, all the flowers looked normal, but this year only 2 flowers, I think, had full 5, 3 sepals and 2 petals plus 1 lip. Otherwise, all other flowers were missing either 1 petal or 2 petals altogether. So that's another puzzling, condition or puzzling fact that I observed about this orchid this year. Hopefully next year, if I do something different, hopefully it'll change. But that's something I'm gonna have to pick on pick on brains of my orchid expert friends just to see what they have to say about this. And if you, for those of you who have pink girl or have orchids that have done the same thing to you, have you been able to figure it out and course correct? Let me know if you do have something to share about this aspect. So this orchid is currently in a clay pot, and it's been in this clay pot for maybe 3 to 4 years, and the media is, well, it's plural. Media is a mixture of a lot of things. I remember I threw bigger rocks at the bottom, and then I will have bark in there. I have lava rock and sphagnum moss. I think at that time I was playing around with a ratio, 60-40 ratio, 60% lava rock and 40% sphagnum moss in clay pots. And this orchid liked it, and I might have thrown in, I think, a couple pieces of broken clay pot pieces in there. Essentially, what I wanted to create was an environment or a condition where it has good drainage, but then also have sphagnum moss to help retain some moisture without it being all soggy inside. And with clay pot, clay pot is really porous. If you look closely or put it under a microscope, you'll see clay pots are extremely porous. So it's actually really good if you want to, ensure that you don't have root rot problem, and use, rocks or bark chips in clay pots. It can be advantageous. However, for new orchid hobbyists, if you use clay pot, you won't be able to see how roots are growing in clay pots. So that's something that's kind of a drawback if you enjoy watching root development. In that case, I would recommend that you use a plastic container, a transparent plastic container. How I water this orchid is typically I would give it 1/4 cup water. However, when I see that this orchid may need a little bit more water, I will go up to 1/2 cup. And because it has this 8-ounce outer cup, this plastic outer cup, so even if there's excess water, it'll just, be in that outer cup. And I would let it soak for a day, maybe even a day and a half, because, well, I know at the bottom there are some bigger rocks inside the container, so it's not that the roots are sitting in water. Number 2, if I soak it for longer, the clay pot is able to absorb enough moisture, so by the time I dump out all excess water, the whole entire pot is somewhat wet, saturated, and then the media inside is also wet enough that it will complete a wet-dry cycle, and that's a week in my environment. And here what you're seeing is just some new ways that I'm using to hydrate area roots. When they're long enough, I just put them in there, let it soak for a couple hours. And in fact, when I was doing this video or taking the photos, I just let them sit overnight, and I did that repeat. I did let them sit overnight, take the roots out in the morning, and then in the evening I start again. So I did that for a consecutive of 3 days, and eventually in the end the roots look much better, because in my environment I have reduced the use of humidifier quite a bit, because I looked at my humidifier humidity meter. It's always around 50 and 70, 60%. 60% is kind of the average. So I feel like it's humid enough that I don't need to use my humidifier too much. But then, I see area roots having a little bit of dryness to it. So this is a method that I use to keep them hydrated without having to use my humidifier all the time. And here is a bonus footage, something I throw in just to allow you to see this orchid in a different light condition. This is on my grow rack, and I have installed strip LED lights at the bottom of each shelf. So this is just a different lighting condition to give you a sense of what this orchid look like on my growing rack. Overall, I think this orchid is cute and it's rewarding, and the fact that it gives me 2 spikes this year is super encouraging. I may repot this orchid, but I haven't decided on that yet. But if I do, I will definitely make a video and give you an update. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!